On arrive tout au bout de notre conférence Human Advantage. Nous avons une dernière conférence que nous allons démarrer tout de suite. Pas forcément changer, pourquoi toujours changer, mais simplement s'améliorer, être plus efficace dans beaucoup de domaines pour nous améliorer, les entreprises, les équipes. Comment rester intelligent dans un monde très intelligent? C'est à vous avec Gerd et Gigerenzer. À vous.
Hi everyone. Now it is time for our closing keynote, and I am delighted to introduce our speaker, Professor Gerd Gigerenzer, that I will have the honor to interview is my colleague, EMILIE BOUTES, that you know very well now, our Chief Innovation Officer at the BVA family. Professor Gigerenzer is a giant in the world of academic research on human behavior and decision-making. The long-time director at the Max Planck Institute for Human Development, Professor Gigerenzer is director of the Harding Center for Risk Literacy at the University of Potsdam, a partner at Simply Rational, the Institute for Decision, and vice president of the European Research Council. He is also the former professor of psychology at the University of Chicago. Professor Gigerenzer is the author of multiple books. I have some here, translated in more than 20 languages, including How to Stay Smart in a Smart World, published in 2021, I think, which will be at the center of our conversation today. Welcome, Professor Gigerenzer. We are honored and very excited to have you at the Human Advantage Conference and to have the opportunity to talk with you about how to make better decisions in a digital world.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Here I am.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. It's such an honor to be here and having this conversation with you, Professor. So today we are at the second and final day of the Human Advantage Conference. The exploration around AI across many different topics in many different sectors was absolutely impressive. Today we want to conclude, and today we want to conclude around a very fundamental subject, which is very central to your book, How to Stay Smart in a Small World. So we're going to be talking about the limits and the risk of this new world, this new reality, and what must be done to remain in control of our lives. You put it very well in the final sentence of your book. How do we make the digital world a world in which we want to live? The idea is to have this conversation in three different parts. I'm trying to anchor you in the way we're going to be discussing this topic because it's a very big topic. So we will be discussing first the limitations around AI and what it can do and cannot do, because we will see that you've experienced that it cannot work all the time. Second, we will be looking at the risk that the current development of AI poses. And third, finally, we'll conclude around the solutions that you offer and you propose. So before we start and we delve into those three topics, I would like to ask you for a general perspective around that challenge that the world faces with the emergence of AI.
Yeah. It's not the AI that is a problem. It is the people behind the AI. So it's not a super intelligence that soon will have humans like dogs on its leash. But it is the old problem: who owns technology and how it's being used. That's often hidden behind the discussions about whether AI is a big benefit or it's a big horror and so on. That's the wrong question. So we need to think more about what is the use, how do we put AI to use. So before 2000, most of us, including me, were absolutely enthusiastic about the potential of AI. And I remember medical doctors who thought finally the information will be broadcast to everyone in the world without interference of industry or politics. And the dream of Immanuel Kant about an enlightened world would come true. And it was not at all thought to be a pro-profit enterprise. Even the young founders of Google wrote in 1998 an article where they pointed out that a search machine should be a scientific tool and warned against its misuse as an advertising, money-making machine. But it took about 3 years, and then they totally turned around. So that shows that we need to find a way to turn the wheels back and to change the world in which we are, where we are surveilled, where our data is used to build models of ourselves to predict and manipulate us into a world, to a digital world in which we want to live.
All right. And this is, this is pretty scary. So let's start with what you believe, what you call the illusion and the AI beats human. Can you tell us a bit, some examples, some illustrations? I know I've read about, the dating apps, the automated vehicles. What are the limitations today when it comes to some of those AI? I know some work, obviously, because people use it, but some are actually pretty limited, and you have a strong opinion on this. What can you share with us some examples?
Yeah. So first, the general principle. Today, what we mean when we talk about AI are deep artificial neural networks. There are different kinds of AI, but let's talk about these. And these are statistical machines. No statistical tool is the best tool for every problem. And we need to repeat that. So the vision that there soon will be a superintelligence that can do everything that we humans can do and think like humans, just much more better, is a fiction. So we need to ask a different question. What are the domains where AI is promising and where not? And the first way to make a distinction is to separate what I call stable worlds from uncertain, unstable worlds. A stable world is one where the future is similar to the past and the rules are set. So the big successes of AI were in these situations. So this includes chess game. It includes Go, Jeopardy, and now large language models who have as a basis a highly stable network of words and correlations from which they can make predictions. If we go in the other extreme, uncertainty is usually produced by us humans. And when we try to predict human behavior, AI doesn't do as well. That means here deep neural networks. And the failures have been well known when IBM's Watson, after winning a game, Jeopardy, which was a great achievement, then turned to cancer, to Watson Oncology, and by now it has been dismantled and sold in pieces. That's not where it was successful. Or more recently, when we predict human behavior, like the future of fragile families, a Princeton project, then that doesn't work very well. Not very well means it's not better than a simple heuristic, like that just deals with 2 or 3 variables in predicting behavior. And in general, the more uncertain something is, the more simpler we need to make the algorithms. That runs counter to the idea that big data is always a good thing. So that's our first principle. We need to ask the question, where will be an AI application be successful and where that's not the case? The dream that AI would solve all our problems is a religious one. It's a technological faith. And it's no surprise that it comes from California. And it reminds me on the hippie culture, which in a similar way dreamed about a solution that could solve all our problems. No, we need to think along. And we need to open our eyes and use AI where it's useful, but don't buy every business promise.
That's very interesting. Thank you. I'm sure our audience will be enlightened. The other thing I remember about, in your book, which I found really interesting, is this concept of the Texas sharpshooter. You talk about being cautious against fake relations. So sometimes you feel like you have a really good correlation, but actually it doesn't mean anything. And so you call it the Texas sharpshooter. Can you tell us a bit more about why it's called like this and what does it mean?
Yeah. So that's a story about a sharpshooter who shoots at a barn. And at the end, he shows you amazing performance. So the target circles, so the holes are in the middle of the circle. The only problem is that the Texas sharpshooter shot first and then painted the circles around the middle of his balls. That's called, in statistics, that's called data fitting. So that means you fit your models. And the more free parameters you have, the better you can fit. If you shoot at a barn, you just need 2 parameters. So you locate the target into a place that fits in the height and in width, and you can easily do it. So machine learning tries to protect itself by doing out-of-sample prediction. So that's a way to go over that. But there are quite many studies still published in the social sciences, for instance, including economics, that basically just fit their models to data and then call this fit a prediction. There's nothing predicted. Data was first, and then the model was fit. That's the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. For instance, one study claimed that they can predict whether couples will be still a couple or be divorced in 5 years, and can predict this with 90% perfection. The problem was there was no prediction. It was all data fitting. They knew already which couple had divorced. So that's a kind of statistical literacy. Always ask, what was first, your theory or your data?
Thank you. Just before closing the chapter on the limitations, I want to summarize for our audience the 3 different areas that we just talked about. The first one is how you explain that AI doesn't solve every problem in the world, and that's a good thing. It doesn't help you find love in a normal way, and it has limitations. The second finding and insight that we talked about is about the false correlation. We just talked about the Texas sharpshooter and how you can make correlations that don't mean anything, and so you have to be really careful when doing that. And then the third part, which we talked a little bit as well, is the stable world principle and the issue with uncertainty and the fact that AI can only function in a stable world. So now we're going to talk about the risk. You consider that the predictive power of AI is limited by the uncertainty, of humans, right? So it presents different risks. And one of the risks that you highlight is the problem with the lack of transparency. Today, AI is quite of a black box. We can always share, when you have clients, you can always share what is in the black box, because then that's your secret recipe. But that can be dangerous, right? Because if you can not share, or if you're not sharing, then it's not transparent. And then you get even the people that are actually making that AI, creating it, don't always know exactly all that comes in. So how does that, I'm sure it's dangerous, but what's your opinion on this absence of transparency?
Yeah, I believe that for sensitive algorithms, transparency should be mandatory. So sensitive algorithms are, for instance, credit scoring, or up to, or algorithms that are used in court in order to decide whether you get bail or not. And these algorithms should be transparent. Now, there's a problem that many of the credit scorers I've worked with, they don't understand the algorithms in the first place. They're too complicated. We have shown that credit scoring is one of the domains with high uncertainty. That the prediction whether a person will pay at the right time can be as well be done by very simple algorithms that we call heuristics that just look at 2 or 3 variables. And then that can be made transparent. I'm working at the moment with large credit scorers to convince them that they can turn transparent. And there's no reason why they wouldn't. And we need to have a larger value in our societies that people understand how important decisions about them are being made. And they also then can decide to accommodate, for instance, most credit scorers give you bad scores if you have more than 2 credit cards. Everyone should know that. And that's easy. And so it's a societal problem that citizens should have a right about transparency. And there are many more algorithms that can be made transparent as it's being claimed. And also in society, in predictions, for instance, remember Google Flu trends. That is Google engineers' idea about how to predict the spread of the flu. That was an intransparent algorithm. We only know that the original algorithm had about 45 variables, and we don't know the algorithm. And again, the flu is a virus that behaves highly unpredictably. And in this situation, it's not at all clear whether complicated and therefore also intransparent algorithms do any better than very simple one. And actually, my colleagues and I at the Max Planck Institute for Human Development in Berlin, we've tested the most simple algorithm, which is, that's what humans do. If there's uncertainty, you don't consider all the past, but only the most recent data point. And actually, we've shown that over the entire time of the predictions of Google Flu trends, the recency algorithm, which is the recency heuristic, predicts better every year. And for all the revisions of the Google Flu trends algorithm. This is a case where one data point beats big data. And we need to think about these possibilities. It can be different. If it's a stable world, it will be different. But we shouldn't assume that always more is better. That's not the case.
Right. The simpler can be better. That's why you talk about fast and frugal heuristics. Exactly. Thank you, Eric. Eric shows all the books.
Interesting thing is that many people are unhappy if a simple algorithm beats a complex one. And that makes them unhappy instead of being happier, that it's more efficient. It costs less. And why this complexity illusion?
Yeah, exactly. So as we were talking about the risk, another big risk, and I know you shared that with me in terms of is the problem of surveillance. Surveillance when it comes to some governments, the risk that it brings. It's not just the governments and the organizations. I mean, it's them, but it's also every one of us and how we behave, right? So you're explaining that the fact that we're hooked on algorithms, that we're hooked with this different social media and all that, we actually participate in this surveillance mode, right? We give our data, sometimes implicitly, sometimes not, but we kind of like play a role in that behavior. So do you want to tell us what you think in terms of what's happening around the surveillance?
Let me start with an analogy to explain the situation you are in if you are on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, or some other social media platform. Think about the following situation. In the city you live, there is a coffee house which offers free coffee. Now, everyone goes there because it's free. Wonderful. As a consequence, all the other coffee houses get bankrupt. So you have no choice anymore. But still, it's free. It stays free. And you chat with your friends, but in the tables, there are bugs. And on the walls, there are video cameras that record every word you say and to whom. And send it to analyze it and send it to third parties. And the coffee house is full with sales people who constantly interrupt you to offer personalized products. That's about the situation you are in when you're on Facebook, Instagram, or other social platforms. You are not the customer in this coffee house. You are the product. Your attention is the main product. The customers are the salespeople who work for the advertising companies and who pay for your coffee. So that's about the situation of surveillance. And many people think, oh yeah, this is just Meta who has the data. And Meta is a good company and it's not a government. That's a big illusion. The American law, which we know, at least since Snowden, can have access to all the data that the tech companies have. That's not only the case in China, it's also in the US. The big difference is rather than in China, surveillance is open. In the West, it's covered. We had to find out the way Facebook gets on our data, not because Facebook told us that, because it was revealed, and so on. The analogy with the coffee house also tells us what the solutions would be. The solutions would be, we want the right to pay for our own coffee so that we are the customers and not the sales force. Now, the question is, how much would that cost us? I've made a simple calculation. If we want to reimburse Zuckerberg, that is the Meta concern, for its entire revenue, not just the profit, the entire revenue, then how much would every person or every user have to pay per month? The answer is about $2. That's for coffee. And we would have our freedom and privacy. That could be done. But we would need politicians who see through the game and don't fall prey to the lobbyists. And we also need users, ordinary people, who see through and are happy to sit in this coffee house and not pay for the coffee. The studies I have done in Germany, which is a country which has a history about surveillance. Think about the Stasi or earlier in Germany, there are governments who had loved the technology to surveil and manipulate people. So in Germany, we thought people would have open eyes and be willing to pay if it would be possible. So we asked a representative group of German, over 3,000, how much would you willing to pay per month so that all the social medias are no longer getting your data, making models of you in order to get the income from outside, as from the people who advertise. And 75% of Germans said not a single cent. So with that kind of a privacy ideology, we are not getting to make a change. And it's the same people who complain when one asks them, what is your greatest concern in the digital life? Say, oh, that my data is taken and I don't know what's being done with that. That's called the privacy paradox. People say, I'm concerned about my privacy, but I'm not willing to pay anything for it. So the societal problem is not just at the level of politics or the tech companies, it's already in the people that our values are changing. If you only think back 10, 20 years, people were on the street for protesting against censors and other privacy issues. Now, people are willing to post profiles where there's more private information than that was asked in the census.
So what do you think in terms of like how can we encourage that political courage and also like that change, like for all these humans that do not realize what's happening, and how do you encourage that change? It's really something very difficult.
Yeah. First we need digital risk literacy, that people understand the system, that they understand they're in a coffee house and what that means. And we need to educate everyone. If you think we already understand, the data doesn't show that. For instance, a study of over 400 CEOs and top executives of major companies asked the question, is there evidence that these executives have any experience in AI or statistics? Answer, 92% no. Do journalists understand what they write? A study in the UK looked at all publications in half a dozen major outlets, from Telegraph to Guardian to BBC, and asked the question, are the reports about AI critical? So do they look at both sides? And the answer was that about 60% of the journalists just repeated the marketing promises of the tech firms, period. How about digital natives? We might think that they at least understand how to tell facts from fakes, or how to judge the trustworthiness of a website. And my colleagues in Stanford have analyzed in one study over 3,000 digital natives. These are high school students or undergraduates, and put them in front of a screen where they had a real website that, for instance, talked about minimum wage. So minimum wage, arguments against and pro, and then basically was explaining that in the US, it's not a good idea. In Denmark, yes. And they were asked to judge the trustworthiness of this website. And the result of the study was that 96% had no idea how to do that. They didn't know the fact-checker techniques. They basically read from the beginning till the end as one reads offline, and then thought the site is cool and the person who signed has a PhD, so it must be trustworthy. And techniques that fact-checkers use, like lateral reasoning, are not known. So lateral reasoning means you don't read the entire website, you just read the beginning to find out what's about, and then immediately go into About Us and out of the website and try to find out who is behind it. And here we have these are 3 examples that illustrate the massive deficit that we have in risk literacy, in understanding how we are being manipulated and what we can do against that. And that should be a program worldwide to make people strong and resistant and open their eyes so that we have, again, a digital technology and a digital world in which we want to live.
All right. I'm listening to you. I hope that we have some kind of like fact checker training program one day so that, all the citizens can be a little bit healthier in terms of in that area, because this is very scary. And as you said, there is no universal way of knowing, and it's very, very dangerous. So if I summarize those 3 different solutions that you propose, the first one, which is a huge one, is the changing the business models for those big companies such as Google, Facebook, Instagram, like all those different platforms where we push a lot of private data. So changing the business model from an advertising model that exists today to a fee model where you would basically own your own data, and that would solve the privacy problem. So in order to do that, you need political courage, right? So we need the help of the government and the political courage to make sure all the humans are kind of like go on with this change, because it's something that's very difficult to change. And then finally, have some kind of fact check method or training for every citizen in the world to make sure that there's less disinformation and that people can see through all those fake news, really, because that's really a big danger for our world. Thank you very much. I'm going to let Eric finish with, he has a question, I think, for you to conclude. Eric?
Yes, Professor, it was really a very insightful conversation. I have the final question, which is maybe a more personal one, if I say. Are you optimistic that we will be able to stay in control and build the digital world in which we want to live?
Yes, and that's why I've written this book, and that's why I'm talking to you. I'm not a person who gives up and complains. We have to do something about it. And I don't think that people will never notice how they're being manipulated. And I also think that people will find a way to profit and use the positive sides of the digital world without the influence of extremely rich people, mostly white men, who use or misuse the internet and take us as in our attention as the product to sell.
Thank you, Professor. And to do that, and we really encourage all our audience today to read your book, How to Stay Smart in a Smart World. It's very powerful, and it better helps you understand human behavior and how to make smarter decisions. Exactly. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Professor, and have a nice day in Paris tomorrow.
Voilà, c'était notre dernière session. Un point très rapide avec Adrien. Adrien, ça fait un moment qu'on ne vous a pas vu. On va dans quel sens? Eh bien, écoutez, on va démarrer avec le début de l'après-midi. Sanya, on a parlé de coach, on a évoqué les idées produits, des personas interactifs. On a parlé des LLM, des hallucinations. On a évoqué l'idée qu'on peut utiliser un LLM pour noter le degré de précision d'un autre LLM. On a parlé d'hallucinations, je le disais à l'instant. Comment fait-on pour éliminer les hallucinations? Alors, il faut enlever des choses, mais pas trop. Comment fait-on? Comment fait-on pour augmenter les notes de validité? Est-ce qu'on décide d'abaisser la barre? La question de l'intervention humaine, combien souhaite-t-on en avoir ou pas? Et la dernière session, celle qu'on vient d'avoir à l'instant. Comment faire du monde digital dans lequel nous vivons un monde où l'on a envie de vivre? C'est vrai que c'est un monde qui peut parfois s'apparenter à une jungle, un monde qui peut faire peur. Voilà, la question, c'est pas tellement l'IA, c'est vraiment comment l'utiliser et qu'en fait-on? L'idée que l'IA peut résoudre tous nos problèmes, c'est de la fiction. Qu'est-ce qui est arrivé en premier, votre théorie ou la donnée? Voilà. Est-ce que l'IA nous donne des choses qu'on n'a pas envie d'entendre? Est-ce qu'on la réutilise ou pas? Les citoyens ont le droit à la transparence, ils ont le droit de savoir ce qui se passe dans cette boîte noire. Et puis la vraie question, c'est est-ce que vous êtes le produit? Alors peut-être payer pour le café alors. Bref, voilà, c'était très intéressant tout ça. Nous sommes arrivés au terme de ces deux très longues journées. Nous avons eu beaucoup de choses à partager avec vous. Voilà. Et on se retrouve l'année prochaine. Merci. Et à très bientôt.
Bye. See you next year.